So today we're going to do a bit of paper piecing, and I thought what I would use is these fabulous large framed floral dies. To get started, the first one I'm going to show you is the large framed Oriental lily, and I did this card some time ago, and as you can see I've paper pieced this all in one colour apart from the leaves. I didn't paper piece the leaves, I just used Lisa's gel ink pens. Now these are water based, they're blendable, fabulous pens, well worth the money. So if you haven't got them and you're thinking about it, don't dither, they're fabulous, you won't regret it. And the frame that you can see around the edge is made with Lisa's stamp and die set, the frame it's at. Unfortunately that's also out of stock at the moment. Not sure whether that's coming back, but I can let you know at a little bit later on. So that was one of the cards that I made, and that was a simple piece of paper piecing. And to me, this set is the easiest set to paper piece. I mean, the pieces are all large pieces and they're quite straightforward. So this is one of the easiest ones, which is why I didn't want to do it today. So that's the large framed Oriental lily for that one. So then I thought I would show you the modern tulip. This is the large framed modern tulip, and with all of these you get 3 dies. This first one will cut into your card, the second one will provide you with a frame around the edge, so this is cutting into your card, okay, and then this one here is cut out with the second frame, so you've got a mat and layer, and then the third frame gives you your bottom mat and layer. Okay, now what I wanted to do with this was to make it a little bit different. So I've matted and layered all of those using the frames out of the modern tulip set, and then I've matted the whole lot onto the largest of the nested stitch bubble square dies. And I've also saved all the little bits that come out of here. These are in my pot here. You can see those at the bottom, because they're useful if you run out of gems or you've got no domes or anything like that. You can use them to add a little bit of interest to the back of your card, like I've done here. Then that ties the front of your card in with your mat and your layer. Okay, now I don't know whether you can tell, but these flowers here are raised up a little bit away from the normal die. So I've raised these up, and what I've done is I've taken the actual die cut here and I've snipped these parts out, just these 3 flower heads, right? And then what I've done, I've used an ordinary bit of card, it's not very thick, just gives it a little tiny bit of dimension, and I've placed the flower head on the card, and I've used a really fine liner pen to draw around it, and then I've cut it out. And the only thing I would say is when you're cutting it out is remember to cut on the line that you've drawn, because if you cut outside the line your card will show outside your die cut, and you don't want that. But what I also did was, you can see here there's pen on the back of here. I actually used one of my marker pens to match the colour of the card and just went round the edge of the card, so that if there was any card just slightly outside the die cut, you wouldn't actually notice it, because it being the same colour, it'll all tie in and you won't notice any sort of little extra bits of card that are hanging out. Okay, right, so what I did then was, after I'd stuck this onto my card, I then stuck the flower back down into the place where it would have been in the die. Okay, so that you've still got 3 flowers in the right place. All right. And then you'll see here I've cut the die again in 2 other different colours of card, so that when you come to paper piece it, you've got your original colour, which is a darker colour, and then the other 2 colours will sit inside those die cuts and stand out. Alright, so you'll then end up with your original die cut frame and then 2 different colours of your card. This one I wanted it to be totally monochrome. I've done black and white ones, red and black ones, whatever colour card you want to cut it out of, it's going to work. But what I would say is don't throw away the bits. So these bits here are all the bits that were cut from the original die as my frame, all right? And I can use those at a later date on a different flower. So because I've got this one cut, because I used it to cut have them on my different colours, I've got all the original pieces that I can then piece back into here, so I can use this frame as well. But what you can also do is use this as a stencil. So it's got several different uses, and providing you're careful, and I would tape this down because obviously this card isn't that thick. This is the American Craft cardstock. It's not a really thick card, but if you tape it down onto your cardstock, then you can use it as a stencil, providing you're careful with the way you manoeuvre your ink. Okay, so that's the tulip. So then we move on to the rose. Now, as I said, I've not done the rose before, so I thought that I would stick with the rose today so that we could see how the rose goes together, if you like. Now, obviously I've cut this several times. I've cut it in brown because I wanted the brown as my base layer, and I've matted and layered that onto a piece of grey. So I've cut it in brown, I've matted it onto dark grey, then I've used the larger die of the three and I've made another mat. And then because it didn't look quite enough, what I've done is I've used one of the squares from the Stitch Bubble squares, and I've made another mat and layer, and I've layered these up. So I've used pads to layer this up. You can see I've already paper pieced the leaves in. I've got a dark red here, and I've also got a lighter red. So when your die comes out of your machine, obviously it's going to have all the pieces still sticking in it. Okay, what I would do is, it's going to come out this way. So I'd put a piece of card on here, take it out of your die cut machine and flip it over. And then once you've flipped it over and you've taken it off your plate, put another piece of card this side and flip it back. Then you can take your die off your die cut. And then all you need to do is take out the bits that you need. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this off. So I've got my flower there and I've got my flower there. Now I can decide which colour reds I want in which part of the die. Alright, so if I move that up slightly so that you can see everything. If we start off with the lighter petals on the outside, I think that would be a good place to start. And paper piecing this is going to be easy-ish because I've got it set out in the same way that my die cut piece here is set out. So if I just lift these pieces, you can see how easy this is to paper piece in. I'm not gluing as I'm going, I would normally, but I just wanted you to see how easily these pieces slot in and how effective it looks as soon as you've put those pieces in. Now I've only put 3 pieces in there, but already that flower is coming to life, don't you think? You can either put your glue in the aperture or put the glue on the piece of card that's going to go in where you paper piece in. Personally, I don't really think it matters. You just do whatever suits, to be honest. It's really rough. I think with the bigger pieces I would probably just use the glue straight out of the bottle. And you can always blot some off if you think you've got too much and it's going to squeeze out of the sides. You can always blot it off before you put it down. Well, I'm going to use the tweezers to put it down so that I'm not getting my big fat fingers in the way. And because these tweezers are really precise, I can get those pieces, she said, hopefully, exactly where I want them. And if you wipe any runs off as soon as you see them, you won't notice them once it's dry. So watching this is probably quite boring, but I just wanted to show you really how easy it is. Yes, it's fiddly, but I honestly think it is so worth the time and effort to do, because when somebody sees this, receives this card, they're going to wonder how you've done this, because it looks so intricate. They are fabulous dies, they cut really well. I use, as I say, the American Craft cardstock. I'm just going to use my brush here because I want the glue to go all the way to the end of this little piece without going too far in, so that it comes over the edge. Okay, so there's only 3 pieces in there, but I think already you can see I love fiddly at times, Pat, but I've got to be in the mood for fiddly. So don't do paper piecing when you're feeling a bit stressed. Although it's quite relaxing, I do think that it's probably not the best time to do paper piecing when you're feeling a bit stressed, because if you lose your rag, you'll end up throwing it all out of the window, and that's not really what you want to do. I know it's only card at the end of the day, but we don't like to waste too much, do we? But these dies in particular, I think, are just perfect for paper piecing. And they look so effective once you've finished and you've got everything, you know, where you want it, and got your layout right, got your colours right. I just think it's worth the effort. So you see here where these little pieces here are quite narrow. I'm just using my paintbrush, and I think actually it might be easier to put it on the die cut that I've cut out, so that if I put a bit too much on, I can dab it off before I put it into place, but that it is going to stick where I want it to stick. Because that's one of the only problems, is getting it to actually stick where you want it to. So the next 2 bits I'm going to add are also going to be light ones, and then as I come in I'm going to go into the darker ones. So I'm going to do these 2 here. Which are these 2 here. Sorry, I went a bit quiet then, didn't I? I was like on another planet. But it's quite mindful, this. And it's a bit like, you know, when Lisa goes quiet when she's colouring. This is sort of the same sort of thing, because you can't do both. I mean, I'm trying to sort of keep a bit of dialogue going so that you don't all fall asleep. But it is quite a mindful thing to do, and you do sort of lose yourself in what you're doing, so you can forget to actually speak to people. These pieces here are my more fiddly pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my paintbrush method, and I'm going to paint the back of the actual die cut pieces with the glue, because I don't really want to go in with the glue or the paintbrush on these smaller pieces, because I know I'm going to end up with more glue over the outline than I am not. And because you're using a wet glue, you have that tiny little bit of time for wiggle room, so that you can just slot this into exactly the right place. Now, of course, the other thing you could do is use a double-sided adhesive sheet. So you put your adhesive sheet on the back of your card, and then run your die through your die cutting machine as normal. The only thing I would say is, because that's then providing you with a thicker a thicker combination, you might have to run that through 2 or 3 times to make sure that it cuts properly, because that double-sided adhesive sheet will just give you that extra bit of thickness that could mean the difference between the die cutting out properly and not. We're just fitting these fiddly little bits in the centre. Don't be afraid of paper piecing. You just have to be brave. Looking at that, I think you'll agree, if I just lift it up slightly, because that centrepiece is quite dark. But I think when you see it close to, the effect that you get from that paper piecing is really good. I think that looks really pretty. So because I want to put a sentiment on the outside, I went with the squiggle script sentiments, and I didn't want to just put a flat sentiment on here. So what I've done is I've stamped the stamp and then matted it with the die cut, and I've cut the frame 3 times. So I've layered that up so there's a little bit of depth on here, and I'm going to put it across the corner here. So I'm only putting my glue on these 3 bits here. But I've also used some double-sided sticky pads, which I've layered up so that it gives me the depth of these frames, and then that way the sentiment won't bend on my card. I'll just get this off here, like that. So I'm just adding my glue. I'm going to have to use my brush because my bottle has decided to heal itself. So I'm just putting my glue on those 3 little pieces there, and I'm just adding this across the corner like that. So now that I've got my pads doubled up, it looks more or less on the same level all the way across, and I think that just finishes it off quite nicely. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed it.